Chapter 18. On the eve of the battle, he always changed his identity to suit his role. That night, he thought of himself as John Brown. Brown rode in the front passenger seat of a tan panel van that bore no markings, perfect for a predator, or a pack of them. 7 minutes, Brown said, rubbing at a sore knee. He heard grunts from behind him in the van, and then the unmistakable kerthunk of banana magazine seating and the chick-chink of automatic weapons feeding rounds into breeches. They left Interstate 695 and crossed the bridge over the Anacostia River, heading toward the part of D.C. few tourists ever ventured. Drugs, apathy, poverty, they were all there. They all festered here. And because they were an infection, they had to be cut out, the area doused with antibiotics. They left the bridge, headed south on I-295, and then east again on Sweetland Parkway. They exited 2 miles later and went south of Buena Vista. "Be smart and disciplined," Brown said, pulling a sheer black mask down over his face. "Nothing gets taken, and nothing gets left behind. Agreed?" Grunts of approval came from the blackness of the van behind him. Brown leaned over and took the wheel while the driver put on his mask. A female voice in the back said, "Work the plan." "Smart choices, smart fire," a male said. "Surgical precision," another male said. Brown pressed the microphone taped to his neck. "Status, Cass?" His headphones crackled with a woman's voice. "Good to go," Cass said. She was in the van trailing them. Brown said, 50 seconds out." More rounds were seated in chambers. A few soldiers coughed or blew their noses. The tension in the van was remarkably low, given the task ahead. Then again, the men and women following Brown were highly trained. This was neither a new drill nor an unfamiliar assignment. They pulled onto a spur road that hooked around back to the west, where it met the Lincoln Memorial Cemetery. The van stopped where 3 streetlights had gone dark, thanks to Crossman pellet guns 2 of his men used the night before. Brown's driver killed the headlights. The rear of the van opened, and 4 men dressed head to toe in black spilled out. Brown got out after them. Before clicking shut the passenger side door, he said, 0330. The driver nodded and drove away. The second van disgorged its passengers as well, and soon 8 men and 2 women were climbing up and over the wall and into the cemetery. They turned on night vision goggles. They wove through the green shadows and tombstones on a route that had been scouted repeatedly in the past 3 weeks. The intelligence was solid. So was this entry and exit route. Now it was just a matter of executing the plan. With his sore knee, Brown struggled to keep up, but he soon joined the others strung out along the tree line as they looked across a junky parking lot toward a dark and abandoned machine tool factory. He listened, heard the purr of gas-fired electric generators, several of them, which was all the evidence you really needed to know that there was more to that relic of a factory than met the eye. "See them right there?" Cass whispered. 2 by the door, 1 on either end, just like I told you. Cass was a big woman in her early 30s with short blonde hair, and she was extraordinarily strong from years spent training in CrossFit. She was also one of the most competent and loyal people Brown had ever met. He'd had her scout the machine shop, knowing she'd do the job right. He turned up the magnification on his night vision, peered across the lot, and spotted the first 2 guards. They were lying on mattresses on either side of a double door. A third smoked a cigarette at the far corner. The 4th sat on his haunches at the opposite end of the building. "Formation is the same," Brown murmured into his microphone. "Cass and Hobbs take the center, Price and Fender the flanks." They padded softly toward their prey. The 2 guards sleeping at the doors didn't have a chance to stir or make a peep before Cass and Hobbs snapped their necks. And the 2 watching the corners of the factory had no warning as Price and Fender came up behind them, flipped loops of piano wire over their heads, and crushed their throats. Chapter 19. In the misty August dawn, 6 patrol cars with lights flashing formed a broad perimeter around an abandoned machine tool factory in Anacostia. Despite the early hour, small groups of people were standing outside on stoops and sidewalks, peering at the old brick building as if it were some cursed place. Bree, Samson, and I had responded because we were closest, and we found the 2 patrolmen who'd made the discovery shaken. They laid out the situation, which began with an anonymous call to 911 and ended with what they'd found in the old factory. "We saw enough to fall back and call in the cavalry," one said. "You did right," I said. "Show us." The officers led us around the rear of the building. We could hear generators rumbling inside when we turned the corner and saw the first strangled man sprawled 10 feet away on gravel and weeds. The piano wire that had killed him was embedded in his flesh. Early 20s, Hispanic, better than 6 feet tall, and well over 200 hard pounds. He wore a black wife beater, baggy denim, expensive Nike basketball shoes, and lots of gold bling. "Took somebody awful strong to do this," Bree said. "You know it," Samson said. I dug through the victim's front pockets and came up with cash and a vial of pinkish powder. "Tastes like meth," I said after dipping a gloved finger into it. There was something odd about the angle of the dead man's hips, so I pushed the body forward. Nothing on the ground, but when I lifted the tail of his shirt, there was a 9mm Ruger in a concealed carry holster at the small of his back. "He never got the chance to go for his gun," I said. "So somebody awful strong and awful sneaky quiet," Bree said. There were 3 other dead men outside the factory. The 2 by the doors were African American and had suffered broken necks. The one at the far corner was Caucasian and had also been strangled with piano wire. All of them were buff. All of them were armed. Not one of them carried an ID. "So how did it work?" Samson asked. "One killer?" "He'd have to be a ninja or something," I said. "I'm thinking 4. "At the same time?" Bree said. I looked around, saw no light bulbs in any of the exterior light fixtures. "At the same time and in the dark," I said. Then gesturing toward the steel doors, I asked if they were guards. What were they guarding? Samson went to the near door, turned the knob, and pushed. The door creaked open. We got out our mag lights and, pistols drawn, entered the abandoned factory. I led, my beam flickering down the cement-floored hall to swinging double doors, which I pushed through. Big machine tools had once occupied the large open space. You could see the outlines of them on the floors beneath a film of grit and dust. You could smell the oil of them in the air. There was also a faint smell of engine exhaust. Pigeons flew through broken windows 2 stories above us. The sun was starting to light up the area, but I kept the flashlight on, peering around, seeing that about halfway across the factory, the vault met the walls of a 2nd story. In the space below that upper floor, there were 2 large gas-fired electrical generators idling, the source of that exhaust smell. "No one move," Bree said. I turned and found her setting the factory floor. She scuffed at the grime with the toe of her shoe and then turned her light back the way we'd come. "We're leaving footprints here," she said, "but not back in the hallway. It's been swept. Maybe mopped." I got what she was saying and trained my flashlight on the floor by the double doors. The floor there was clean as well. On either side of the doors, there was a clean path about 20 inches wide that ran the length of the room, tight to the wall. Each ended at a still industrial staircase. We didn't need the flashlights to see that the stairs climbed to 2 catwalks and that the catwalks led to doors, one at either end of the 2nd story. We walked along the left path, our flashlight beams finding mounds of junk, old pipes, conduits, and metal fittings, all coated in filth. But the steel staircases looked freshly swept. The catwalk, too. One door was ajar, and I could see light shining beyond. "Alex?" Samson said. He'd stopped on the catwalk behind me and was shining his light down at the factory floor and onto a 5th dead man sprawled on his belly there. "He's been shot in the head," Bree said, focusing her beam on the nasty exit wound at the back of his skull. "I'm calling in a 2nd forensics team." "Smart," I said, shifting my attention to the open doorway. I moved closer and pushed the door inward, revealing a short passage that was blocked from floor to ceiling and wall to wall with black, heavy-gauge plastic sheeting. There was an industrial-strength vertical zipper in the sheeting and 2 small square windows through which light was blazing. I stepped up, looked through one of the windows, and felt my stomach fall 20 stories. "Alex," Bree said from behind me, "what is that?" "An airlock," I said, twisting away from the window. She must have caught the shock on my face. Said, "What?" "Call in 2 more forensics teams," I replied, hearing the tremor in my voice. "Better yet, call the FBI. Ned Mahoney, tell him we need a team of the best from Quantico, and have them bring chemists and hazmat suits." Chapter 20. By the time my old friend and partner Ned Mahoney and 2 FBI chemists arrived, there were news satellite trucks setting up and news helicopters circling overhead. I was on the phone with Chief Michaels, having just given him an overview of what we'd seen inside. "Jesus," he said, "the FBI will take this over, won't they?" "Not yet," I said, "which brings me to your question from last night. Okay? I'm honored, but my place is in the field, and right now it's inside this factory. God damn it, Cross, I need someone managing my detectives." "Chief, they're bringing me my hazmat suit. I'll call when we're out and know the full extent of things." I hung up before he could challenge me. I went to the FBI van where Mahoney, his chemists, and Sampson were climbing into protective suits. "How many did you see?" Mahoney asked. "At least 5 more bodies," I said. "Wait until the cable shows get hold of this," Sampson said. "They already have," said Bree, coming up behind us and eyeing the hazmat suits. "Someone needs to talk to them." "Once we know what to tell them," I said. "You coming?" She made a sour face and shook her head. "I'd get claustrophobic in one of those things, and we don't even know what's in there yet." "Which is why we have to go look," I said, and I kissed her. I donned the hooded visor. The temperature outside was pushing 90, and inside the suit, it had to be well over 100 degrees as we started back into the factory. Sampson let the chemist go through the airlock first. I heard one of them inhale sharply. "Be careful in there," he said. "No sudden moves." "Believe me, there won't be," I said, and I ducked through the flaps of the airlock into a room set up as a sophisticated laboratory. The FBI chemists were already studying the mind-boggling array of equipment and the various chemical processes that had been underway at the time of the massacre. Sampson and I went to the 5 dead people in the room, 2 women and 3 men sprawled by various workbenches. They wore hospital scrubs, lab goggles, booties, and surgical hats and masks. Every one of them was shot either through the head or square in the chest. I scanned the floor all around, said, "I haven't seen a cartridge casing yet." "No," Sampson said. "They policed their brass, swept their way out." "Professional gunmen," I said. Mahoney and the chemists came over. "What do you think?" I asked. Pitts, one of the chemists, said, "It's no Walter White setup, but this has the makings of a serious drug lab. Meth and ecstasy." "Any danger of this place exploding?" I asked. "Lots of potential danger," Pitts said. "But now that we know what we've got, we'll start shutting down the reactions, then we'll do an inventory and take the samples we need. We'll call for a full team to dismantle the entire lab and store it for trial." I couldn't begin to think how long it was going to take to investigate this case, much less bring the killers to court. Sampson and I headed toward a second airlock at the other end of the laboratory. We went through it, and in the next 20 minutes we found the rest of the illegal drug factory as well as 12 more bodies. 5 females, 7 males of various races and ages. 22 dead in all. 3 of the females were found in a packaging room with long stainless steel tables, large mortars and pestles, digital scales, hundreds of boxes of Ziploc bags, and 4 vacuum sealing machines. 6 kilos of raw meth were piled on the table. Sampson figured there was at least twice that amount already wrapped, sealed, and boxed for delivery. "If this were a case of assassins hired by rival drug lords, you'd figure they would have taken the drugs with them," Sampson said. "Maybe they were after money," I said. "An operation this size has to be generating millions in cash." In the last room, we found the cash. On a pallet, there were banded $50 bills similar to the ones we'd seen at Adita Kravik's place, stacked 3 feet high and wrapped in cellophane. Next to that were two guys in their mid to late 30s wearing suits and ties. Both had been shot between the eyes. Has to be at least $1 million right there. And they leave it? Samson said. I don't get it. I don't either, I said. Revenge? Maybe. Not one of the victims seems to have put up any kind of resistance. It's as if every single one of them was surprised and killed with a single shot, which means suppressors on all the weapons. Definitely. Samson said, everything about this is scary, smart, and precise. The shooting, picking up the brass, sweeping as they left, the lack of a reason. Oh, there's a reason, John, I said. You don't kill 22 people if you don't have a damned good reason.